do you have a hack for how to get better or faster at these conditional questions without diagramming? And I'm like, well, it's really that you get so good at diagramming that you can do it in your head.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 7 Sage LSAT podcast. I'm Henry, and I'm joined with
Bailey. Super excited to be here. Haven't been here in a while.
Thrilled. Riveting. Shall we get down to it?
Incredible.
So,
We shall.
Bailey, November just happened. Good stuff, hopefully. Hopefully good things happening. No, I mean, you always hope for the best. I like to hope for the best. Do we ever pray for rain? No, that's just the wrong thing. We always want a sunny day. But sometimes the day is cloudy. Now, you get to the big event. It's your wedding day. It's raining. What do?
You reschedule for another day.
Right. Yeah. Reschedule. Right. Exactly. You
Wedding's
reschedule for the
off.
January wedding. Yeah, exactly. No. So what we're talking about is it's the last ditch or the last test coming up for this testing cycle, January. Hopefully you don't need to take the test, but if you do, what are we going to do in order to get a better score? Right? Maybe we've taken August, we've taken November. We hoped for the best, we trained for the best, and maybe we came close or just came short, and so we want to squeak out or squeak, both? Squeaky?
Maybe both.
We're going to squeak, eke out some extra points. And so we're going to be talking about what to be thinking of when you're going into this last month of studying, the mindset, some things to think about, maybe what to study, how to know what to study, what you should change, what you shouldn't change. And yeah,
all good
let's
ideas
jump into
to
it.
talk about. Let's chat about all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can go into mindset.
Yeah, I like that first. Because I think a lot of this test, as you guys have probably figured out yourselves, as we talk about on the podcast, is mental game. Like I'm like, it's 50% timing and accuracy, 50%. Are you mentally taking yourself through these sections in a way that's not like shutting down your brain when you realize that you maybe messed up in a previous section? Like that's like on the micro level when you're literally in a test.
The
But also
war
just big
within.
picture. What?
The war within.
The war within, exactly. There are two wolves.
Yeah, exactly.
We always have two wolves.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, I think it's just a matter of like, even on the micro level, in a test, in a section, in a drill, how do you pick yourself back up and keep that confidence up to keep moving and make quick, confident decisions, but also like distribute your time wisely, make sense of all of this stuff, not psych yourself out. But then big picture, it's like, how do you make sure that you come back from tests where you maybe got your score back and you're like, this isn't quite where I want to be at. What do I do now? I think it's so easy to get really discouraged and almost feel like, I probably hit my ceiling. Like I'm not maxed out. Let me just give up now. Mm-hmm. Or you might be like, I swear this isn't my ceiling, but I'm stuck in this plateau, or I keep getting similar scores, whatever it is, and I don't know where to go from here. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's what worked for you?
Well, I think it's helpful to remind yourself first that like you have a little over a month to study. That's a lot of time if you've already been studying, right? So whatever that extra month, a month is not a lot if you just started studying, but it is a lot if you've already been studying for a while. There's a lot of things that you can change and a lot of improvement that you can make in the period of a month. So you have a lot of time in order to study for the January test. So I think that's one thing you can just get out of the way. You'd say like, all right, this is a very long time for me to make some progress on my goal score. It's a lot easier to move up 10 points. I mean, whatever, that's a little bit ambitious, but it's a lot easier to move up 10 points in a month if you've already been studying for a little bit than it is to move up 10 points in a month. Well, I guess, from complete
10 months in 1 point. What's easier?
Exactly.
10
months
points in a month or 10 months in 1 point?
You can make a lot of movement in a couple weeks if you know kind of what you're doing already than if you have no idea what's happening to begin with. And so I think that with that extra month, just tell yourself, like, you can definitely get your goal score within this month. Now, a huge 30, 20-point jump, it's going to be a lot harder. Things are possible, but you can make a lot of movement in that month. So just one, not stressing about, man, I'm running out of time.
Right.
Excuse me. I think it's a big thing that you can tell yourself to put yourself in a good mindset. The other thing I think that you can tell yourself too is that, yes, maybe your actual PTs or your tests have not been so great, but if you've been doing questions and you've been getting questions right, you have the tools you need to get other questions right. a lot of the time when we get a question wrong, it's not that we don't know what's going on in a question, it's that we're not recognizing that this question maybe follows a pattern or something that we do know how to do, right? So phenomenon
Right.
hypothesis, I think, is a pretty normal one where a lot of times people understand, hey, look, I know that correlation doesn't equal causation. But then when they hit a 5-star weakening question that's really dressed up, they don't recognize that, man, this is just correlation versus causation. And so
Right.
you don't realize that, like, yeah, that question, you do have the tools to get it right. It's just a matter of recognizing it. And so I think, I don't know, to me, that was a big help to me when I was studying was to realize that, wow, a lot of these 5-star questions and difficult questions, they're not anything different than what I've been doing. I just need to learn
Right.
to recognize them. I don't know, does that kind of track with your understanding?
No, totally agree. Because I think I used to freak myself out and be like, what's the catch? Like, why can't I get these 4 or 5 star questions right? And I was trying to do something fancy and different when I was approaching those versus like a 2 or 3 star version of the exact same question. It's like, no, there's so much pattern recognition that really helps with this test. It's not a matter of changing up your strategy when things get tough or when it gets to the end of the section because you're like, oh, well, they're trying to pull out all the stops here. Like, I got to do something different. Like, do the exact same thing every time. If like what works for you for a flaw question is first you ID premise conclusion, then you ask yourself, why am I not believing this conclusion based on those premises? Like, spot the gap. Then you
Mm,
keep that in mind, go to your answer choices, do 2 tests. Is this true about the argument? And then is this a flaw? If you're doing that and that's getting you to the right answers for easier questions, don't be changing that up for harder level questions. And I think
yeah.
a lot of that too is the mental game of just realizing like they're trying to gaslight me, they're trying to psych me out, they're trying to make me feel like I don't have the tools to attack these harder versions of these questions. But you got the tools. Like we're telling you right now, you already have the tools. You just want to figure out what you're doing in those drills or in those easier versions of those questions, even just untimed, and then just slowly transfer those same steps over to your process timed or on full sections or on full tests.
Yeah. So I mean, the word process I think is good because you do want to have a process for every question type. I would
Right.
say, and knowing your process, say like, hey, look, right, sufficient assumption questions. There's usually only two ways those go, right? Premise to premise gap, premise to conclusion gap, and then there's some
Right.
offshoots that are maybe not conditional based. It's more like cost benefit analysis. But if you know that they usually fits within those two frameworks, every question you do, you should that is a sufficient assumption. You should be thinking, is this a premise to conclusion gap or is there a premise to premise gap? You're actively looking for that. And then
Right.
you see it, good. What do I do? I connect the premises, or I see it, premise to conclusion gap. Or what do I do? I got to connect the premises to the conclusion. And so you want to be thinking, I'm actively looking for these patterns in this particular question type. Right? Same thing with weakening phenomenon. I mean, I always talk about phenomenon hypothesis, which is such a big one.
Right.
Phenomenon hypothesis. All right, I see two things happening at the same time. Authors suggesting that one is causing the other. Maybe it's the flip. Maybe there's a third cause, or maybe there's a third thing that's causing both of them to happen. And so what you're
Right.
doing there is you're enforcing or you're telling yourself, forcing the questions into the box. Now, of course,
Right.
you don't want it's not even really forcing the questions into the box because, like, the questions already exist
Like
in
they
that
already fit in
box.
the box. Yeah. Don't
Yeah,
be fitting
exactly.
the
They
like
already fit
square
in the
peg
box, but
into a round hole.
exactly, you're forcing your mind to be like, "No, it's probably in one of these boxes." So instead of doing
Right.
26 individual questions, what you're doing is, I don't know, 8 types of questions and, or 8 you have 8 structures that you're actively looking for. And so when you hit a sufficient assumption question, you're like, all right, I know this structure. Or you hit a strengthening question, it looks similar to sufficient assumption. All right, I know this structure. If we try to do
Right.
25, 27 individual problems and look at each problem as its own special thing, usually that's when, I don't know, I think people start to fall apart a little bit.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I used to just get so overwhelmed. Like I was like, "What? How in the world am I supposed to be able to have all of these tools in my toolbox to be able to like jump into each new question throughout an LR section, for example?" But again, it's really just that pattern recognition that makes this all possible, and it's going to take a lot of practice to be able to get to the point where you can recognize those patterns right away. But like all the more reason to be clocking in on a few full-time sections throughout the week, maybe some targeted drills. Like I try to do like 1 to 3 targeted drills each day. It's just like 5 to 15 questions, focused on the highest priority questions in your analytics, and then making sure that you're clocking in on that 1 PT a week, which, by
Yeah.
the way, if you are looking for just kind of like a generic study plan that'll carry you to January, I would focus on doing something like what we just said for the first few, like 4-ish weeks. And I guess we got a couple more weeks than that, maybe 5 weeks,
Mhm.
depending on when this podcast comes out. And then that last week, you're really just honing in on doing some full-time sections each day. I try to say like 1 to 2 full-time sections, maybe a targeted drill on top of that. Cut yourself off for PTs though. Like 5 to 7 days before, I'm like, don't be taking a PT a few days before the actual LSAT.
Yeah. With respect to the targeted drills, a good thing to do would be to go to your analytics, figure out what question types you struggle the most with, and start
Right.
with those, right? Create some drills so you study or you struggle with necessary assumption questions. Okay, so I have a problem with necessary assumption questions. I'm going to start doing some necessary assumption drills where I'm doing them all in a row. And then when you're
Right.
doing all these questions in a row, what you should be looking for is like, hey, what is the pattern here? What are some of the patterns or the tropes that necessary assumption questions fall into? Phenomenon hypothesis is a pretty big one, again, for necessary assumption, where they
Right.
say, hey, look, my friend, he's really thirsty and he also, exercised a lot. And so it must be that being thirsty forces you to exercise, right? Or I don't know, right? Being
No, I
thirsty
like that
makes
one
you
because right
want to
away I'm like,
exercise.
what? Probably
No,
it's the
that
other
makes
way
no sense.
around.
Yeah, exactly. It's the other way around, right? I mean, but that's a phenomenon hypothesis. So, like, a necessary
Right.
assumption would be you have to assume that exercise doesn't make you thirsty, because if it
Right.
did, that would be bad for the author's argument. And so you say, "Oh, I've seen that before," or I see what's going on here. And then you do another question. Maybe it's 3 questions later where you have a similar structure there. It's a little bit different. Right? Smoking and lung cancer are highly correlated. So smokers must be doing something weird that's causing them to get lung cancer. Well, in order for that to work, you have to assume that smoking doesn't cause lung cancer. Because if it did,
Right.
right, that could explain the phenomenon. And so even though those questions are different, you realize that a trope of necessary assumption is, generally speaking, it's shutting down alternative explanations when you have phenomenon
Perfect.
hypothesis. Now, of course, it's not every necessary assumption question that falls into that bucket,
Right.
but a lot of them do. And so while you're doing these targeted drills, you're looking to think like, well, what are these buckets? What are the bucket?
Right.
I mean, we always say phenomenon because it's just the one that always comes to mind.
Well,
It's a
no, and
pretty
on
big
that
one.
note, yeah, I already have the necessary assumption ones in my brain. It's like they'll do some necessary assumption where it's a cost benefit analysis. They're saying like, hey, there's some negative
Yes.
side effects of this drug, so you should never take it. And what you must be assuming here is that the positive effects of the drug, whatever it might be, are not outweighed, or they are outweighed by the negative effects.
Yes.
Any sort
Yeah.
of cost benefit analysis, it's like, well, if they're going to recommend that I should do this thing, then we're assuming the pros outweigh the cons. Or if they're
Yeah.
recommending that we shouldn't do this thing, we're assuming the cons outweigh the pros.
Yeah.
So that
And
can
by
be another pattern to look out for.
No,
We're
I
going
think
to
that's a
say,
great one. And the idea is like when you're looking at the problem, you try to think like, what's the general theme here, right? With the cost benefit
right,
analysis. Then when you see like, oh, right, this more expensive train ticket gets me there quicker, so I should buy it. You think, well, all right, well,
right,
this is a cost benefit analysis too. It's a little bit different. It's not exactly talking about drugs,
right.
but I have to assume that the benefit of getting there quicker outweighs the additional
Outweighs that
cost.
physical cost. Yeah,
Exactly. Physical? Is it a
that's
physical
good.
cost? Is money real?
Literal cost. Well, there's that question
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Money does not really exist because all that would require. Wait, do you know this question?
Yeah, yeah, I
It's an
know
LSAT
exactly.
question.
Yeah, money
Okay,
does
yeah.
not really exist. All that
Because
would be
all that
needed
would
for
make it
money to make
disappear.
disappear, right, is a universal loss in belief in money.
Wait, good
Um,
job. That's literally the exact words of the question.
we see this on a small scale every day with fluctuations of the stock market. Yeah,
Wait,
I know
what?
that
Do you have
problem
it pulled
there.
up right now?
I know that problem very well. That's
That's
a pretty
actually
tough
crazy. I
question.
know that one too. That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good one.
Um,
So that's a sufficient assumption question. I guess too that this also speaks to another element in why that question is very hard. And now I feel bad that we're talking about that question in the abstract. But what's nice is like you can do that question without really knowing why the answer works the way it does. Because what
yes.
you can do is you can eliminate a couple answer choices merely because there's a premise to conclusion gap there, but the answer choices or two of them don't talk about the conclusion, right? Which you need to do
Right.
in a sufficient assumption if you've got a premise to conclusion gap. And then
Right.
two, you can eliminate the other two answer choices because it's bringing in new ideas.
Right.
And they that aren't related to the stimulus. It's like a mistaken belief, I think, is one of them when we're not talking about mistaken
Yes. And we're
beliefs. And
like,
then
I
there's
don't know
some
if
other
these are
strange one.
true or fake
Yeah,
beliefs. We just know that people believe in it. Exactly.
exactly. And so, but you can only do that if you have your process to begin with, and if you know about these common tropes, and if you recognize, all right, this kind of looks like it's falling into this bucket, but I don't really know, but I can eliminate a couple of these answer choices because that doesn't seem to really fix the type of problem that I think I'm seeing. And then
Right.
only this answer really seems to talk about the stimulus, so we could pick that. Again, right? Much easier to do if you're not doing that problem on the individual level. You're thinking about the bucket that it falls into.
Right.
I guess what to change and what to keep moving forward. I don't know, like how much we just talked a little bit about changing. If you are looking at each problem individually, trying to think about all these questions, falling into some sort of I need to stop saying the word bucket, but I think it's
No,
good.
I always say that too, though. I'm like, yeah, it fits into this box, this bucket. You just slap a label on them, put them all in the same little place.
Yeah, I guess so. We've talked a little bit about changing that. Is there any other things that you would recommend for people to change
So I
in the
think in
lead up?
general, if you're not already taking advantage of the tools on the Seven Sage website, like we talked about how to go to your analytics, click on the priorities by question type, or it might say priorities by tag, and that'll start telling you where your highest priority question types are. And the nice thing, by the way, on that is like you don't even have to then go from that page to the drill page to create a drill. They already have built-in drills for you. Like you could just click start drill right there to start drilling those highest priority question types. So get familiar with that. And then also get familiar with the little study plan tool on the website. I don't know if people have been using this as thoroughly yet, but it's something that we more recently launched. I think it's super helpful. You just go
Yeah,
to the main page, click study plan, and it'll start generating a plan that's based on your own strengths and weaknesses. It's also populated by those analytics, but they'll give you more creative targeted drills on question types that you might not have been focusing on, making sure that you're also spending your time wisely throughout the week, like distributed among full sections, and then that full weekly PT. So I think that's just a really helpful tool to lean back on, especially if you have not been using that already. But if you've been doing all this stuff and you're like, so what else do I do different? Like I feel like I've been following all your advice. What's next? What's different? I mean, one of my first questions on that is just like, how much time are you spending wrong answer journaling? Or similar to what we've been talking about, like really reflecting on the questions that you're seeing and at least jotting down a note or two based on it of like, what what's common about or what's more of like a cookie cutter that I'm noticing from this question type? Like what's
hmm
a pattern here that allows me to see the parallels between this and other questions that I've seen before? So like invest
yeah,
more time in that wrong answer journal, which I think we've done plenty of podcasts on this in the past. But quick rundown, it's just making sure that you can check in on why is the wrong answer wrong? Also, why did I fall for it? Like what tricked me into thinking that the wrong answer was right? Why is the right answer right? And why did I overlook it or eliminate it or just not even read it in the first place? And what am I going to do better next time? Need some sort of
yeah,
action item, specific drill set or strategy, and make it practical. Don't just be like, read better. Be like, must pause every couple words, must translate into my own words. Only then do I let myself move on.
yeah. I think to add on to that too, not only write what you need to do better next time, refresh yourself on what you need to do
Yes.
better next time right before you drill. Uh,
Yes.
it's really easy to forget, even if you have a really good, oh, I'm going to do this better next time, or I'm going to adjust this for the next drill. It's easy to forget that. So right
Right.
before you do the drill, just look at the couple things that you want to be thinking about. This is a lot easier to do when you're doing individual problem drills, right? Where you're saying, okay, this is what I want to do for necessary assumption in the next drill I do. And you
Right.
just refresh yourself like, okay, this is the things I got to pay attention to. And then eventually that'll be natural and you can add in more lessons, right? Or more things that you want to be thinking about because you're not actually thinking about it anymore. One of the things I always I mention this every podcast because it just always comes to mind here, right? Which is that many does not mean most. And I just
Right.
forced myself to recognize every single time I saw the word many to think, I know what this means. It means a lot to somebody, but who that is, I'm not so sure. Another one
Right.
was what I was looking at. Like this is common in necessary assumption, but it was also pretty common in RC. The word primary, just telling myself every time I see the word primary, I'm going to note and I'm going to tell myself like primary does not mean only, right? Primary just means
Right.
the number one of an entire set of things. Right?
Right.
Noticing those words key. So I mean, those are just a couple. For any given person, it's gonna change a lot. I don't know. I always
Right.
go back to what I did, but I don't know, is there some? Are there
Yeah.
lessons that you
No, those are
used?
good. I definitely had to drill that into my brain. Yeah, any of those quantifiers, like I had no idea what sum
Yeah,
meant when I first started doing this task. We talked a lot about this on a previous podcast, but yeah. Um those ones for sure, like definitely good to get down. Also know the negations of all of those quantifiers. Um
yes,
A lot of my
What
stuff was
else?
like just making sure that I wasn't making those silly reading mistakes. And I feel like there's so many different ways to get yourself to do that, but like must pause every couple words. Like words on the page
Yeah.
are the words on the page. They're nothing more, they're nothing less.
Yeah.
I
Take
got
the
that
test
from you. Just
literally
like
as possible.
putting like WOTP on the top of your scratch paper really quick as soon as you start the section. Like words on the page. That's all that I need to be focusing on here. The answers are right there. I just can't be adding to or changing any of the meanings.
Yeah. Usually, if you
Um
have to think a lot about the problem, that's a bad sign. It's true, right? If you really have to think about what you're doing, it probably
yeah,
means you're missing something in the stimulus,
right.
or you miss something in the reading in the passage. Often, there's not a whole lot of answers that require a lot of deep thought.
Right.
Most of them are pretty straightforward. If I'm kind of assuming that the person who's listening, they've been doing some studying. Most of them are actually pretty straightforward, right? It doesn't take
Right.
some really big leap in logic or some crazy rocket science style thinking. It's pretty simple. It's just hard to see. And so if you catch
Right.
yourself thinking a lot, go back to the stimulus. Be like, maybe I missed something. Maybe I missed the word primary, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Yeah,
No, that's good. And on the note of like making sure that you're implementing your takeaways, your what can I do better next times, super helpful to do it right before a drill. Like just comb over your wrong answer journal. There's also a way on the Seven Sage website, by the way, where like when you're adding a note to a question that you missed, you can do this little plus sign that'll pop up wrong answer journal template. It'll have
mm,
you like it'll give you those questions that we're
so
telling you
useful.
to answer anyways. And then you can go back and look at all of your notes. It's just like a little notes icon right at the top of your dashboard. You could look at that anytime on the website. And that is a really helpful thing to do is just like comb over those notes and then go into a drill. And then better yet, too, especially if you want to start by getting some takeaways and apply it right away, is I like to do drills that are maybe smaller sets of questions, like just 5 or 10 questions, where instead of doing show answers at the end, you show answer after each question. And you really thoroughly understand like where you went wrong with each question, make sure that you have a takeaway and then apply it to the next question. And that's a really good thing to do with like just a single question specific drill, necessary assumption, for example. You notice a lot of them have to deal with causal reasoning or some sort of proposed explanation. And you are able to immediately start applying those and seeing those patterns just a lot more hands on instead of
Yeah.
like doing all the questions and then forgetting what was the difference between those questions once you get to the end of the section.
Yeah.
But I think it's a matter of like making sure that you have diversity in these drills too. Like you don't always just do the show questions after each time. You don't always just show questions at the end. You don't always just do simple drills that are focused on individual question types. You're always switching things up and you're making sure that you're adding a twist into it if you are struggling. And that's
Yeah.
also what that study plan is going to be helpful for because they help you out with a lot of different, more creative drills.
Yeah, I think another thing to speak to is that we all only have a certain amount of like mental energy that we can put
Right.
into any given section or test. And one thing that I think can get overlooked, again, I talk about this all the time, but eh, there are some problems that are in theory hard, and maybe you even get them right. But the amount of energy or mental energy that you expended in getting that answer right is detrimental to other questions. And so
Right.
conditional questions are a huge, huge. What's the opposite of victim? Oh my gosh. This is I every day I
Perpetrator.
get old, a perpetrator of this
Was that
problem.
right?
Yeah, we'll go with perpetrator. There's something like that.
Close enough.
Are a huge perpetrator of this type of thing, where a
Right.
lot of conditional reasoning style questions, even if you get them right, they feel like they take an eternity. When really,
Right.
almost no conditional reasoning style problem needs to take longer than a minute. I mean, that's actually the truth. It often does, but it doesn't really need to. And so things like streamlining your sufficient versus necessary process,
Right.
learning how to quickly diagram conditionals, just do them in your head so you instantly have a translation, I think is
Right.
worthwhile. So not just practicing the things that you are bad at, but practicing the things that might appear to be good. If they take a long time, or even if they take up to target time, you can usually find some extra time there, which means that the actual test just gets less stressful. You want to make sure
Agreed.
that a lot of your thinking, or try to make as much of your thinking as possible, like reflexive, right? So when we first start looking for the conclusion, at some point it's just a reflex. You know what the conclusion is. So then you can
Right.
spend that energy on something else. Same thing with conditionals. You start diagramming only if, okay, this is necessary. Well, once you know that something's necessary and you've proved that, like, oh, A is necessary for B, You don't have to think about why is it that B can't take me to A, right? Don't think about the why. They just told you that, right? If I
Right.
study, I'll get a good grade. If I get a good grade, does that mean I study? No, you don't have to think about the why. You just tell yourself
Right.
it's not the case. So yeah. What
Exactly.
else?
Yeah. And I think that goes back to the idea of like not thinking too much about this test. Like, I think people will be so freaked out about, well, first of all, I get this question constantly still. Like, do you have a hack for how to get better or faster at these conditional questions without diagramming? And I'm like, well, it's really that you get so good at diagramming that you can do it in your head. And at that point, if you're doing it in your head and it's a lot of like chaining together conditionals, might as well just like write it out right away if you are the kind of person that's going to get lost in the sauce, if that's all being stuck up in your head. And so a
Yeah.
lot of this is like, it really shouldn't take much longer at all to diagram. What takes longer is the hesitation, the should I diagram, should I not diagram, the, ooh, I'm not sure, I don't remember, is this sufficient, is this necessary? Any of that, like lack of confidence, basically. And so, yeah, like maybe if this sounds like you, this is your sign. Do a 5-question conditional reasoning tag drill. If you want to do specific question types, must be true are really helpful for this. Parallel method of reasoning, parallel flaw, sufficient assumption, necessary assumption sometimes. But honestly, I would say that, like, especially just must be true, doing a lot of those in a row and making sure that you're just seeing how to do this stuff untimed, getting more confident with your diagramming process, understanding the difference between sufficient and necessary, and then just doing it over and over and over until it becomes a little bit more muscle memory, a little bit more, yeah, like you can just take the back seat. It's passive thinking instead of active force thinking. That's your
Yeah.
goal there.
Yeah. It really is. It's like, I mean, to speak to phenomenon once you know that introducing an alternative explanation is bad,
Right.
don't think about why. It's like you're
Right,
like, "Oh, this
exactly. You don't even
introduces an
have to
alternative
go back into
explanation.
like
This is the
the
right answer then."
yes.
Yeah, exactly. The more you think about the why is after you look at the problem or after you're done grading.
Right.
When you're in the moment, you should be, yeah, this is good. You can always go back and check afterwards. Other things to think about timing, as you said, the first 10 questions are usually a little bit easier. So
Right.
be more intuitive on those. After you've been studying, your intuition has changed. Right? The point of studying is to change your thought processes. And if you've been studying for a while, you don't need to put 100% effort into question one. It's a main
Right.
conclusion question. You see the main conclusion. You should just pick it. You don't have
Right.
to think about flow of support here. Right? Oh, this supports this and this supports this. It's like, okay, this just looks like the conclusion to me based on based on a first read and the months of studying I put in. Just pick that answer choice then.
Right.
Don't go deep. Um, what was the phrase? How to pull back when you're in too deep, or something along those lines. Something
I don't know
isn't
that
that?
phrase. You're gonna have to teach me it.
I don't know the phrase either. Our producer was someone who
Shoot.
said that. Anyways, waiting for a comment from him,
Waiting
but I
for
don't know.
waiting for something to be made.
Any other things to think about before we go into January? I don't know. Studying less, I think, is also good. Or not studying less, but trying to be more pointed in your studying. I think when you just do a mess of everything, it's probably worse because it's harder to take away lessons. So that's why I'm a big fan
Right.
of like the individual drilling, where it's like on day one, you do the weakening questions and you say, like, all right, this is what I want to learn going into Tuesday. Whereas if you do 100 little things on day one and you try to remember 100 lessons, then going into Tuesday, you're going to forget everything.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, just make your studying like don't be trying to do all of these things at once. Just make it more simple. Give yourself a small reachable goal each week and then boil that down to the day scale. And yeah, we talk about this all the time. I think a good sweet spot is between like 2 and 4 hours of studying each day. If you have all the time in the world to study and you're really trying to be productive with your time, I think peppering in some live classes, some group studying, maybe you join a study group, that can be helpful. But you really just don't want to be overdoing it in this time. Like you have plenty of time, like we've been saying. But what you don't want to do with that is be like, well, I only have plenty of time if I'm studying 40 to 50 hours a week. Like, I'm like, I don't know anybody that was actually studying that much and saw the amount of improvement that you'd be expecting to see from that amount of time being put in.
Our producer's chiming in here. One tip: any day you study, do at least one untimed RC passage or an RC passage. I don't actually. I think that's a pretty good strategy. If
I
not
agree.
untimed, then timed. Uh,
Right. Yeah. And like start with untimed as you get closer to the test, as you get more confident, maybe do more timed.
I really feel the one thing I will say before we start wrapping up here with respect to RC is that RC, it's really hard to study in this systematic way that we've been talking about with LR, you can study it by doing problems. It's not super efficient, but if you do a little bit every day, you'll notice some patterns in the way answer
Right.
choices work and in the way passages normally go. And so
Right.
getting a little bit of experience every day, I think, is pretty helpful when it comes to RC. But also, I mean, if you have a month to get a good score, I say it's like, let's just try to get our LR score up as much as possible
Okay, true.
and,
I
and,
would
and hope
focus
for
on
the
LR,
best.
but I agree with I think that too many people are like, RC is a lost cause. I'm not going to even try to study it because I feel like I know how to read already. And how am I supposed to like teach an old dog new tricks? But this whole test is teaching your old dog new tricks. And so
Mm,
yeah, I agree. I think there's more to be said about seeing the patterns between passage styles, for example. Like if you guys haven't gone through the RC curriculum on 7 Sage yet, I think how we put it into those 5 buckets of passage styles is really helpful. And then having at least a little bit more strategy, things to look out for the question types. Like, for example, a lot of RC is just implied questions. So what do we have reason to
yeah.
believe? They're very similar to most strongly supported or inference questions for LR. So you can also
Yeah.
get some RC improvement by doing a little bit like a 5-question set of MSS, do an RC passage, see the parallels there. And there's a lot of parallels also between other RC question types and LR question types. We could do a
I guess
whole episode on that.
one last tip I'll leave us with is that when it comes to primary purpose questions in RC, just remember almost all the answer choices would make sense in a vacuum, right? When they say, what is the
Mm,
primary purpose of the author mentioning how pancakes are unhealthy, right? Like almost
right,
all those answer choices would make sense in a vacuum, but you want to ask yourself, don't just read that one sentence. Think about the
right.
paragraph that sentence appears in and what the entire passage is about, too, when you pick an answer. So I think
Exactly.
that's a lot of those trap answers. It's like, yeah, talking about pancakes are unhealthy. It might support the idea that you should not eat pancakes, but actually, none of the passage is talking about how you shouldn't eat pancakes. So don't pick that answer. It might make sense in another passage, but in this passage, they don't talk about that. And so
Right.
that's one little tidbit. I guess we could take any final I don't know, anything fun going on in your life, Bailey,
Big
before we
segue.
end here? Yeah.
Anything fun going on in my life? I don't know. Oh, wait, I do have something fun. My roommate and I are getting a foster dog this weekend. I'm so
Very
excited.
cool. What type of
It's gonna be
dog?
very cute. They say it's
What
gonna
flavor
be like
dog?
cabochon flavor. I don't even know if I'm saying that right.
Cabochon, like a Bichon Frise mixed with
Cabochon.
a
Yeah, like the
cava.
small little dogs.
What is it? What is the? I know what a cavapoo. I know about what is the cava?
Oh, okay. Cavapoo is probably a mix of cabochon and
Oh, it's
poodle.
just called
I
a
don't know.
cabochon.
It's called a cabochon. Yeah.
Oh, I
Unless
thought it
I'm
was like
saying
a
it super wrong.
I thought it was a mix of like a cava and a Bichon. Not a Bichon. What is it? A Bichon Frise? Is that what
See, I
it's
don't know
called? A
enough about
Bichon?
dog
Yeah,
flavors. Oh yeah, really good
Cavachon.
comment from our producer. Is he an old dog? Can you teach
Oh,
him new
Cavalier King
tricks?
Charles
This is
Spaniel.
this is a new dog that I'm sure can learn new tricks. However, you can also teach old dogs new tricks,
Mm.
like your own brain, if you're trying to learn the
Dogs can learn
LSAT.
tricks. Who would have thought? All you need
If
is a bell
dog
and some
then
food.
can learn tricks.
Yeah. All right.
Really good. You
Well,
got anything
with
fun? What
uh
you're not you're gonna leave us hanging on your life?
I'm trying to think what has been fun lately. I'm not so sure. What has been going on? Been playing a video game called Hollow Knight. Recommend to anyone
Ooh,
after you're done studying. That's
Hollow
been pretty
Knight.
fun. Hollow Knight, yeah.
Oh,
It's
Hollow Knight. That
hollow,
was like
yes.
Holla Knight.
Hollow,
Perfect.
like my life, right? So,
Mm.
um, yeah, every
Let's
night
fill
I
up
have is
Henry's life
hollow.
with.
Yeah.
Here's a really good segue. Let's fill Henry's hollow life with liking, commenting, subscribing.
Wow.
What else are we
Whoa.
supposed to say here? Leave
Yeah,
us a
like, comment,
question.
subscribe. Check out
If you leave us a
tutoring.
question in the comments, yeah, check out tutoring, check out admissions consulting, check out the live classes. But yeah, and if you leave us a question in the comments that we want to use for a future podcast, we can always give you a little free month of a subscription to 7 Sage
Bam.
in exchange for your great wisdom in your brain that is helping us have more podcast topics. I don't know. All
Yeah.
right. We got to end this.
Get me out. Bye.